Good morning and welcome back to the morning devotion here at Mount Gilead. My name is Mike Bridgewater and I'm the operations director here at the church building. Today is November 20th and a few weeks ago at the beginning of November we started working our way through the book of Hebrews, and today we find ourselves in the middle of chapter 2. Just to recap real quick, back in chapter 1 we learned a few things. The book was written to the first century Jewish converts to Christianity. Those Jewish converts may have been in Jerusalem, they may have been in modern day Turkey, they may have been in Greece, they may have been in Italy, they could have been anywhere in the Roman Empire. That's who this letter was originally written to. In chapter 1 we learned that Jesus has a higher name, a better name, that name being Lord. And we also learned that he is the commander-in-chief of the angels. And then last week we started chapter 2 and we learned that we need to have Jesus as the anchor of our soul, and that will prevent us from drifting away from the salvation that we are to inherit. So for today we're going to continue on in chapter 2 and look at verses 5 through 9, which doesn't sound like much, but if you've studied ahead, you probably have realized that there's a lot to these verses. There's a couple different ways you can interpret them, and it's not the easiest to understand. So we need to remember that who this letter was written to. It was written to the Jewish converts, and that Christ crucified was a stumbling block to the Jews, and that the writer of Hebrews is laying out his argument to convince them that Jesus is the Christ. And he does this in the next few verses by going back to a Psalm of David, Psalm 8. And it's one of the most beautiful psalms. It's a very short psalm. It's only got like 9 verses to it. And if you've read it or you haven't read it, you've probably heard it. And it's How Majestic Is Your Name is basically the title of it. But let's go into verse 5, and it says, "For it was not angels that God subjected the world to come, of which we are speaking. It has been testified somewhere," and this is where the writer picks up out of Psalm 8. He says, "What is man that you are mindful of him, or the son of man that you care for him? You made him a little lower. You made him for a little while lower than the angels. You have crowned him with glory and honor, putting everything in subjection under his feet." And then the writer of Hebrews makes some commentary about that, and he says, "Now in putting everything in subjection to him, he left nothing outside of his control. At present, we do not see everything in subjection to him, but we see him who for a little while was made lower than angels, namely Jesus, crowned with glory and honor because of suffering of death, so that by the grace of God he might taste death for everyone." So first, it's important to understand that the man spoken about in the psalm, where it says, "What is man?" or "What is the Son of Man?" that is us, that is mankind, that is human beings. It's not a reference to Jesus at that point. The whole psalm is recounting the creation and the fact that man was the pinnacle of creation and put in a place of honor to be in charge of and have dominion over the creation. So what is man? I was preparing for this week, and a friend of mine gave me a book, and I was looking through this book, and it says, "What is man?" And if you were to boil down man, you would end up with about 10 gallons of water, some carbon, some lime, some phosphorus, about a teaspoon of sugar, 4.5 teaspoons of salt, and about enough iron to make a pretty good sized nail. You could probably buy that today for about $7 or $8. So physically, we're worth about $7 or $8. But spiritually, we're worth a lot more than that. The other phrase that can also add some confusion is where in the psalm it says lower than angels in Psalm 8:5. If you read the psalm in the ESV, it will say, "You have made him a little lower than the heavenly beings." But if you read it in the NASB, it says, "Yet you have made him a little lower than God." And that is what the best translation is a little lower than God. Mankind was made in the image of God. And he recites this stuff to tell us that we are very special. We are made in God's image, and we are given authority over all of creation. And then he continues with recognizing that now, at the present time, we are living in a fallen world, and it is not how it was meant to be. Paul tells us in Romans that the whole creation groans and travails in pain, and that is due to the fall of mankind. And then the writer in Hebrews just simply points us to Jesus. He says, namely Jesus, crowned with glory and honor because of the suffering of death, so that by the grace of God he might taste death for everyone. And that's going to be my point for today. For us, it couldn't be any clearer. Here in 2020, the fall of man is in tack-sharp focus. We can see, just by looking around, addiction, anger, bitterness, cheating, death, disease, lying, disunity, rioting. And then you combine that with isolation and uncertainty, and pretty soon you've got a nice big recipe for desperation and despair. And unfortunately, as we move into the short days of winter and the long nights of winter, that's only going to be exacerbated. So I would just encourage you to let this passage remind you that when you're feeling down, or you're ministering to a friend or a family member, to point them to Jesus and remember his words from chapter 11, where he says, "Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am meek and lowly in heart, and you shall find the rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." So I'm going to leave you with that today. I hope you guys have a great weekend and a happy Thanksgiving. We've got a great worship service planned for this weekend. If you can join us in the building, that'd be great. If not, you can watch the live broadcast at 9 o'clock or 10:30 as we continue our series of gratitude adjustment. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.